Businesses come and go all the time, and it is not uncommon for neighborhoods to reinvent themselves from one generation to the next. But just around the corner in historic Harvard Square, it's starting to look like everything is changing all at once. Empty storefronts and faded signs litter the area where retail spaces are more than 10% vacant, according to a new report from the Globe. In the past few years, several cornerstones, including Tealuxe and Crema Café, have gone the way of the Tasty, which closed in 1997 after 81 years in the square, and the Harvard Square Theater, whose nearly 100-year run ended in 2012. And now another local landmark, the Curious George store, is moving down the road to Central Square to make room for an indoor mall. So, is this the end of Harvard Square as we know it, or just the beginning of a new chapter in the neighborhood's storied history? Joining me are Denise Jillson, the Executive Director of the Harvard Square Business Association, Cathy Botindari, the co-owner of Colonial Drug, which was a 60-year staple of Harvard Square before moving to Newton in 2013, and Shoshanah Garber, the owner of Black Sheep Bagels, which opened in the square last summer. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Denise, let me start with you. Am I right that your take on changes in Harvard Square runs along the lines of nothing is permanent except change, good places come and go and come again, and Harvard Square is always evolving and always a great place? Is that a fair
Absolutely.
paraphrase? Okay.
Yes.
What about the idea that there is some essence of the square that has been eroded over recent years? And just to put my cards on the table here,
Sure.
I spent more nights than I should have at the Bow and Arrow when that bar was open. And one of the things I loved about the Bow and Arrow was you would see Harvard alums in town for their reunion drinking next to people who looked like they were verging on destitute. Similar stuff with the Tasty. You'd see a wide range of socioeconomic groups sharing the same space. And I feel like you don't see that as much anymore. Am I right about that?
No, I mean, if you went to Grendel's or Shea's right now, you'd find the same thing. Probably, two very authentic places that have been in Harvard Square for a very long time. So it continues. I'm curious, when did you stop going to the Bow and Arrow?
When it closed.
When it closed.
Yeah, so what, late 90s, early 2000s?
Maybe a little bit before then, perhaps.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to get your take on the square as firm as we can before we go to Cathy, who I think has a different take, what makes Harvard Square a unique place?
Oh, because it's an authentic space that has been around since, 140 years before we were a country. So historically, it's very important, with the university started in 1636, and almost immediately it became a little marketplace because even then the students needed things. And we've continued, that. It's expanded. The square is now over 1 million square feet of retail, 44 acres in the business district, 350 businesses, of which over 70% are still locally owned and independent. So, still thriving, still very authentic, very organic, and change is going to happen because it always does.
Okay, Cathy Botindari, you, I know, have a different take. Can you describe for me your experience with doing business in the square and then having to leave it?
Well, simply customers throughout the square left. There's not a draw. A lot of the draws to Harvard Square are going or have gone.
Give me some examples.
Well, you had the tennis and squash shop left after 93 years. That was a staple of Harvard Square, of old Harvard Square, of classic Harvard Square, and it was a destination service-oriented company. You had Clothware was forced out because restaurants wanted to come into the space. You have Curious George, which is it's the only one in the world. That's a big draw to Harvard Square, and we're losing it to Central Square. So when the street performers left Harvard Square, why did street performers leave? Because there weren't passers-by. They couldn't make a living. How can merchants make a living when the walk-by is not there, the customers aren't there? People say, I don't go to Harvard Square anymore. The movie theater was the last nail in the coffin because the movie theater on Church Street had 5 or 6 theaters, staggered shows throughout the day. They brought people from the suburbs into the square who either drank in the square, ate in the square, or dined in the square.
When you say there's no foot traffic, though, I mean, any time that I'm down there, and it's not nearly as much as it used to be, I see a whole lot of people on the streets. I see businesses that, to my eye, look a little more homogenous than what I remember. I don't know if that's nostalgia or objective, but so am I wrong that the foot traffic is still
Well,
there?
let's clarify. The most brick-and-mortar owners will tell you foot traffic is not a synonym for customers. So look at their hands. Are they carrying bags from the local establishments? I think the way the square is going, that it is food. It's going to be food-oriented. And that's great for the square. But at the same time, if you start bringing in chains and mollifying or mollifying?
I think
Making
mollification is-
mollification?
yeah.
Okay. It happened 20, 30 years ago. The Square tried that, and it failed. And don't forget, you bring in big mall chain stores, they can be the worst performing in the chains.
Well, Chipotle had to leave, right?
Because they're subsidized.
Along with American Apparel and LF stores and, Wagamama and Pinkberry, and the list just goes on and on of both international and national stores that have left the Square for the same reasons that, we're having this conversation across the country, which is, consumers are buying in a different way. So, there's a whole, 8 to 10 million people coming to Harvard Square every year. Our job is to get them there. I think it's incumbent upon the stores to get them from the sidewalk into the restaurant.
Let me get Shoshanah in here, just so we don't lose her. When did you open up shop in Harvard Square?
A year ago.
And this was your first location, right?
Yes.
You weren't somewhere before. How important was it to you as a new business to get the location that you did?
Very important. I live right in the neighborhood and saw the need for a store like mine to open where it did. So.
And did you look at alternate locations? Obviously Harvard Square is a great spot to be. Were there other places that you looked at that were appealing, but for some reason not quite as appealing as where you ended up?
We wanted to be in Harvard Square. So there weren't, there are empty storefronts, but not all of them were readily available to us. And when we narrowed it down, this was just a great place to be. When
you say you wanted to be there, is it because, it sounds like you've got a commute that I would kill for, but other than that, what else made you want to be there?
Well, living down the street, I knew that that there was a desire for more mom and pop shops to open, as well as a desire for bagels and coffee and more seats in a coffee shop where the community can come and gather. And I thought that we wanted to fill that specific need for our neighborhood.
Okay. Cathy, let me go back to you for a second. You, just to drive this home, you have a narrative of sort of continuous reinvention and rebirth. Your narrative when it comes to the Square, I think it's fair to say, is one of decline, right? You gave your take on the essence of Harvard Square, the history and the continued level of activity. What do you think the essence of the Square was when it was at its best?
The essence of the Square was it was all inclusive. You could have a Brahmin or a Brattle Street millionaire sitting at the same bar stool or counter with a student, an artisan. People got together, people talked, people socialized. When you mollify the Square, you can go out to a mall in the suburbs and park easily. And why would you want to mollify the Square when malls are closing left and right?
Denise, does the same sort of thing that Cathy and I are talking about, people from radically different socioeconomic groups rubbing shoulders and maybe interacting, are we missing it going on in the Square right now? You said Shays.
I don't know. I go to Black Sheep Bagel, and that's what I find there.
Yeah? Does that jive with your experience?
Absolutely, yeah.
Tell me a little more about that. What's the range of people that you might have in there on any given day?
Anyone. There's the people that are coming to visit the university, the visiting speakers for the Kennedy School, sitting next to the contractors that are working on the construction projects, next to the students and the families coming to Harvard Square for the first time.
All right, because I think our time is finite, I want to get your takes quickly on places that, whatever you think of the Square, whether you think it's gone downhill or it's something cyclical is going on, what are the places there right now that absolutely, positively cannot be allowed to leave under any circumstances?
So Brattle Square, Brattle Theater.
The theater, yep.
Yeah, Club Passim, Cafe Pamplona. I would say that iconically, Levitt and Pierce, that's been there since 1883.
Right,
or Felix Cherie
Native American.
Yeah, exactly. Or Felix Cherie Pierce since 1913, or Grow Your
That
Poetry Bookstore
great.
Since 1927. So, the Harvard Coop since 1882. All of those have to stay.
Cathy, Shoshanah, what's your short list? We have about 30 seconds. Businesses that I would nominate Harvard Bookstore. I think I can't remember if you
1932, but yes, of course.
Bartley's Burger Cottage, I would say.
Which is rumored to be leaving.
Is it rumored to be leaving? Oh, that's a big deal.
Oh, yes.
Pinocchio Pizza.
Absolutely.
All right,
66 years for
what
Pinocchio.
else would you mention?
The heart of Harvard Square was the individual entrepreneurs and family businesses that went there. Is there a future for brick and mortar? I'm an optimistic person, but I don't think so. I think Shoshannah's way that it's going to become an outdoor food court or support food and coffee and that type, but
All right. I guess we have to leave it on that moderately upbeat note. Good luck, and thank you all for being here. Shoshannah Garber,
Thank you.
Cathy Botindari, and Denise Jillson.